Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial, which is going to be focused on integrating Google Social Authentication for our Django projects. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing that you need to have in place is a very simple Django application, and it would be preferable if you have one that already has a set of concrete links and navigation in place. So I'm using one, as you can see here, which is a very simple authentication app here. So I have a register here, a link with the register page and a login page. And then of course, when you log in, it will take you to the dashboard page. Now this exact project here, I will attach the GitHub repository in the description below, and it's also based on a previous video tutorial that I made as well, which I'll also put in the description below. But everything aside, you need to have a Django project that you want to use. It doesn't necessarily matter which one you use, but you just need to have one in place. Right, okay, so let's go ahead and set up a Django all auth, and we want to ensure that our users are able to sign up with their Google accounts and also to sign in with their Google account. So let's go ahead and get started with the process. Right, now all the links here that I will be showing, I will be sure to add them in the description below as well so that you can also see them. Right. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to install Django all auth, and we want to, in brackets here, add in social account because we want to add in Google social authentication. So what we can do is go ahead and install the following accordingly. So we can head on over to our project's terminal, and you just want to go ahead and add in that following line of code for the library. So pip install Django all auth social account. Okay, so it's just going to install that and a lot of sub packages along with it as well. So we just need to keep that in mind. Okay, so it's almost there. So you'll see all of the additional sub packages that are going to be installed along with the default package itself, such as requests and also cryptography, OAuth live, or the OAuth library, etc. So we just want to install that. And what I'll do is I'll wait until it has been installed and then we can continue. All right, so welcome back. So we can see it has been installed. So we're good to go. Let me just clear that up. All right, great. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to ensure within our Django project that we have django.templates.context_processes.request. So all auth needs this for this package to work. But if you are using later versions of Django, so usually Django 4 and 5 and up, this will already be integrated. But we can perform a small check just to make sure. So if I go to my application, and let me go to my settings.py file, I can go ahead and scroll down to my templates list here. And as I can see here, I have already in the context processor, I have django.template.context_processes.request. So we need to make sure we have this functionality in our list here for our templates directory. So we can see that's already in. So we're good to go. Next, you want to add in the following authentication backends list here. So you'll see that we'll need to add in the default auth backend here. So this is needed to log in by our username in Django admin, regardless of all auths. And then to ensure we have all the all auth specific authentication methods, like login by email, we want to add in the following backend here. So we want to go ahead and copy the following here. And we can just add that authentication backends list like so. All right, there will be a few dots here that we can just remove. So 3 at the top and 3 in the bottom. So just make sure that you remove them. Great. Next, we need to add in the set of apps here that's defined. Now, we can check for the default apps here, which will be django.contrib.auth and messages. So that should be in place automatically, but we can just confirm if we go to installed apps. And let's see, contrib.auth and contrib.messages. We can see .auth and .messages is there, so we're good to go. Now what we need to do is install the rest of the all auth packages here. So we have all auth and all auth.account, and then we need to add in all auth.social account because we plan to use the social account for Google, and then the provider itself directly that we want to enable. And as you can see, there's a whole list here, but we're going to utilize Google. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with what we need to add in. So just double check you have django.contrib.auth and django.contrib.messages in place. So then we can just add in all auth and all auth.account, and we can add that like such. I'll just make sure it's cleaner and tidier. Right. Then we have all auth.social account. That will allow us to use a social media provider. And then we need to explicitly state that provider itself. So we can scroll down until we see, let's see, it's alphabetical. So here we have all auth.socialaccount.providers.google. And we want to add that in as well. Right, so make sure you've added that in. Very important that you do so. Right, so we have all of this set now in our list of installed apps. And we can now scroll down. All right, now the middleware. So we need to add in the account middleware for all auth. Now make sure you add this at the top of your middleware, not at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and copy the following, and we can go to our middleware list, and here you can see it. And you want to make sure you add that right in here at the top here. So all auth.account.middleware account middleware. Right, there we have that. Then we have this list here for the social account providers. Now by default we have Google here in place, and that's exactly what we're going to be using. Now we're going to essentially register a Google app here, which is going to take in a client ID and a secret, which is going to be all part of setting up the credentials for OAuth for our Google social authentication. Now, in terms of the key, this is going to be blank because we don't use a key specifically when we are generating an app for Google. We just really need to focus on the client ID and the secret. Now, you can notice here that the social account providers, you can see here that this dictionary is going to take in a variety of account providers. So you can technically replace Google with, for example, GitHub or Apple or Amazon, etc. And just keep in mind they'll have their own preferences in here, but that's how you would add in all the providers with this particular dictionary, as you can see. In any case, let's go ahead and copy the following for our Google authentication. And I'm going to put this just under the middleware. Just add in some space first. There we go. So we have that set. We just need to retrieve the client ID and the secret ID, you could say. All right, so let's go ahead and focus on that. But before we do that, we need to just configure a few more things. Now, the next thing we need to do is set up the urls.py file. Okay, and we can see it is under the pass accounts, and it's going to use the include function to include all of the all auth URLs which we need. So to do that, you can go to your main Django project's urls.py file. Just make sure that you are including, you've added in the include function, which comes from django.urls. And all you want to do then is in your URL patterns list here, where you'll see the Django admin is, you can just add in the following URL and paste that in. All right, so make sure you do that. Great. Now that's going to give us access to a variety of URLs, as we can see is available here by all auth. We're not going to use all of these ones that are here specifically, but there is a specific one that we'll use later on that's going to give us access to the Google URL, and we need to ensure that we have this in place before we actually use that. Right, so assuming you've got everything in place, the last step here is to make your migration. So let's go ahead and copy that. Head on to our application, and you just want to say python manage.py migrate to migrate all those database files, etc., and everything that comes with those apps that we went ahead and integrated. So we can see that integrates everything nicely for us. Perfect. All right, so we've got all of that in place, so we're good to go. And there we are. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to do, of course, is we're going to want to set up our credentials. So let's head on Mac, and with the following documentation here, Now we're going to go a little bit more specific into the settings that we need to set up in Google here. So what I recommend you do is to sign in into a test Google account. I'm already signed into one here, and this is the one I'm going to use, which will be, you could say, an admin of sorts email account, you could say, because this is what we need to set up the basis for integrating this OAuth with Google itself. So make sure you have a Google account open that you want to utilize. All right. Right, so let's continue. Right, so the next thing we need to do is perform the app registration. So we're going to create a Google app to obtain a key and secrets through the developer console. And of course, you guessed it, this is what we need if we go to our settings.py file, what we need for the client ID and for the secret. So that's what we're going to look at now. Now here we have a link straight to the Google Developer Console, which is very helpful. Now there are steps here that you need to complete here, but don't worry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify the process for you. So we can click on this link here. So I'm going to right click, open that in a new tab. And if you're already signed into Google, which you should be, it'll take you directly to that console. So you don't need to worry about navigating or going to specific locations or anything of the sort. It's quite straightforward. Right. Okay, so you may need to go ahead and accept the terms and services. So I'm just going to agree to them and say agree and continue. Right, here we are. Okay, so we can just close that for now. And here is the dashboard. Now we need to make sure that we see the API section on APIs and services. Then we want to go to credentials. And we need to go ahead and create a project first of all. Okay, and we can see we have a quota here. I'm just going to leave the project. I'll just leave it as is. You can rename it if you wish. And then I'm going to say create. And that will give us access now to the credentials section after the project that we're working in has been created. So we just need to give it a moment. Okay, and then we'll just refresh automatically on its own. And there we have it. Great. Now we want to see the section here on OAuth. So we want to create an OAuth client ID. So we can say create credentials. And we want to create an OAuth client ID. And this is going to request user consent so our app can access the user's data. So we need to have access to the user's data in terms of their Google profiles and of course their email and username, etc. So we can choose this option here. Okay. All right, now what we're going to want to do before we continue here is in some cases it will let you create the ID immediately, but in other cases you need to configure the consent screen first for OAuth, and that sometimes does occur. So we can say configure consent screen. Okay. Great. Okay, and now what we can do is scroll down and we want to set up the user type. Now, internal is going to be with all the users in your organization here within Google, or external, this is going to be outside. Now, this is usually if you are working with your application outside, so an external application usually, and you can see here for more information as to the differences. So we're going to go for external and we'll say create. Right, so that's going to take us through a process to edit our app registration. You can see here how that information is going to be presented. So the app name, that's going to want to have access to your Google account, what app name can access this, and make sure it's a trusted app name, and you'll see that information here will be available. And you can configure that in these steps here accordingly. So let's go through that. So the OAuth consent screen, so let's scroll down. Right, so first we need to add in the app name and then the user support email. You can add in some extra things such as the app logo, and then we'll have, of course, the app domain where we can add in the application homepage. So we can add in a link there, a privacy policy link. Now, all of this is optional. You don't need to add any of this in. And then, of course, you can authorize a domain here, and then you need to add in an email address for the developer contact information. So just some extra details. So all you want to do now is fill in the required fields. So add in an app name, a user support email, and then a developer contact info email here as well. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video and add that in myself, and then once I've done that and once you've done that, I'm going to continue with the rest of the process, and then we'll go through the next stages. All right, so welcome back. So what we can do now is scroll down. As you can see, I've added in some information. So Django app 1, I've added in a sample email address here that I filled in, and I've also added one in at the bottom. We can leave everything else as is for now and say save and continue. All right, so step 1 should be done. Great. Now we of course have scope. Now we need to add a scope, or we need to add a few scopes here. So we can say add or remove scopes. And we need to make sure that when we are setting up Google OAuth, that we are able to see the primary Google account email address and also the information in terms of the profile for said account. So we need to make sure that we give access to this information. So the user's email, their name, profile photo, etc. This is very important for OAuth. So we want to select email and profile. And of course, what you can do, you can scroll down and you can just say update. And here you can see that you have selected the scope for the following range. Make sure that you have this in place. After you've done so, you can scroll down and say save and continue. All right, then we go to the third stage, test users. Now here you can test users for your application. However, in our case, we're configuring OAuth a bit differently, so we don't need to use this stage. So we can scroll down, say save and continue. And now we're on the summary page. So here you can edit any section of the previous steps that you went through if you made a mistake or you want to change anything, but you can just see that's all as is. All right, if you're happy with everything, okay, just go ahead and double check that you're good with everything. And then you can scroll down and say back to dashboard and everything will be configured. Great. Now we can head on over back to credentials, and we should be able now to create our OAuth credentials since we gave permission in terms of the OAuth consent screen. So create credentials, OAuth client ID, and let's go ahead and get started here. So the application type, ours will be a web application. You can change the name of your ID here in the interface. So I'm just leaving it as web client 1. And then we need to set up our redirect to URIs. So in this case here, we're going to have authorized redirect to URIs here, and we're going to make sure that we have that set up. Okay, now let's go ahead and do that. So we can say add URI. Now the first one is going to be our domain. Now in our case here, we're working from local development. So we're just going to add in our domain as follows with HTTP, of course. So we can say HTTP. And you want to say ://127.0.0.1 and map that with and of course with our colon, and then we're going to say at 8,000. Now of course if you have a domain name and HTTPS, you just put in your domain name here. Then we need to add in another URI, and that's going to be our login callback URL. It's very important that we have that in place. Now for that, you can get this here in the documentation here as the following here. But you can just go ahead and copy that. And you can just go ahead and let's just make sure I copy that. Right click, copy, and you want to paste that in. Then here you can just remove example.com. Again, like I mentioned, if you're a domain name, you can just substitute that domain name here. But in other words, we'll just put in 127.0.0.1 at port 8000. Right, so you want to make sure you have that callback in place. Very important that you have that set up. Right, so we've got those authorized redirect URIs in place. Now do keep in mind it's going to take a few minutes for these settings to take effect, sometimes hours, so do keep in mind that it can take some time. Right, so we can go ahead and say create. Right, so that client ID was created, and here you'll see that client ID and that secret. So what you can do is go ahead and copy that client ID, navigate to your Django project and add that in, and then that secret as well. Here's the client secret, and you can paste that in as well. There we go. All right, now you can also download the JSON file and then of course get access to it in that way. So that is another way in which you can go ahead and set it up accordingly. Right, so we can just say okay. All right, perfect. So there we have it. So you've successfully gone ahead and created your OAuth client ID and the associate credential. This is important so we can integrate Google OAuth into our Django application. So let's go ahead and continue with the rest of the process, which is very important. So let's go ahead and do that. Right, so we can navigate to our settings.py file now. And the next thing that we're going to want to do is open up, for example, a registration and a login page. So if we have a look at my application, okay, what I wanted to do is just run my server, just for the time being. Okay, there we go. Let's just refresh. And we're good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a link here to sign up with a Google account or to sign in with a Google account. Now I have a register page here and I have a login page here, and all I'm going to do is if we go to register, I'm going to say or sign up with Google just after you see the standard registration here. And for login, I'm just going to say or sign in with Google. All right. Now the functionality in terms of the URLs will be the same sort of process. So just keep that in mind. All right. So that is the process that we're going to do. So what I recommend you do now is head on over to your templates directory, and I'd recommend you have a registration page and a login page where you can add in this functionality. So let's go to register. Now, in order to integrate the link to trigger the, you could say the UI or the login interface for Google, we need to make sure that we add in the filter to load the social account provider. Now, this is usually done at the top of your file here. So I'm just going to put this here, and it's going to be with the percentage symbol load social account. So it's very similar to when you're loading static files, same sort of style. So load social account, and you want to make sure that's added in here at the top of your register.html file, and also here at the top of your login.html file. And I'll just adjust that there. So load social account. So make sure that you have that in place. Right. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to do is go ahead and scroll down. And here we'll have the form that we're using now to register. But what I want to do here is I'm going to add in a breakpoint, and I'm going to say here with, let's say, a H3 tag, I'm just going to say or, and I'll now add in a href, and I'll add in the necessary quotes either side. And what we want to go ahead and say is provider underscore login underscore URL, and we want to set that to Google. Now, of course, if you have Apple, if you have, for example, GitHub or anything of the like, you're going to want to do something similar where you just replace the name there accordingly. Right, so we want to have this provider login URL in place here. Very important that we have that set up. And then we can just go ahead and close this and just say sign up with Google. Now the same functionality will be in place for signing in. So you would just go ahead and add in the following logic. So here I can just copy that style and go to the login page. And under that form, I add in the same thing there, except I just replace sign up with sign in, just like so. Okay, so make sure you've added that in. So this is the URL that we're going to use to access the Google sign in page, sign in / sign up page. If you already have a Google account registered on your application, it's of course going to recognize you immediately. All right, great. So now we can head on back, and I'd recommend you just refresh or rerun your server, should I say. Let's go to register here. And we can see here that we have that in place there. We can see that URL. So I haven't clicked on it yet. So that's going to take us to that URL accordingly. So sign up with Google. and sign in with Google. So we can see that that is quite distinct there. I might want to go ahead and remove that breakpoint actually. Yeah, because it's a bit far away, further away than I thought. Okay, that's a bit better. So there we have that. Okay, now you are currently signed in still to your admin, you could say, email for setting up Google All. So what you're going to want to do now to test this is you want to sign out of your Google account, and then you want to sign in to another Google account for testing. So I'd recommend you go ahead and do that, and then we will continue. Right, so welcome back. So as you can see, I'm now signed in to another Google account, and I'm going to be using this as the main test. All right. Great, so we can head on to our application. Let's just refresh. Let's go to register, and let's go ahead and skip all of this default registration and sign up with Google. Now you're going to see here that it takes you to a page here that says sign in via Google. You're about to sign in using a third-party account from Google. Now this looks quite ugly. We want that generic interface that you always see when you go to a website and say sign up with Google. That's what we want. So let's go ahead and integrate that. So we have that in place. Now, what you're going to want to do to integrate that is you're going to want to head on over to your settings.py file. So let's go ahead and do that. So here we are. And you're going to want to add in the following line of code, which is social account. Okay, and then you want to say underscore login underscore on underscore get equals to true. And that's going to allow you to, when you click on that link, to go to a more, you could say, sophisticated UI, the default that we always see on every website. So social account underscore login underscore on get. So you want to make sure you add that in. Now, another thing I want to mention is we need to make sure that we set our login redirect URL accordingly to our URL for our website. So essentially our dashboard page, you could say. So we want to then go ahead and say login underscore redirect underscore URL equals, and here in quotes, you can just navigate to your, wherever your URLs are for your app. So here you can see my URLs, for example. I have register, my login, and dashboard. Now dashboard, this is where I want to redirect to once I have logged in. So I can go and I can see that I've called it dashboard. So I'm going to set that to dashboard, and that's going to ensure that I'm redirected to the correct location when I log in. Right. You can also set a logout URL as well. So I'm going to set that up as well. This isn't fully necessary, but I'd suggest you do it. So logout underscore redirect URL. And this here, as you can see, I'm just going to leave that blank. So it's going to be to the default homepage, and I'll just leave it as is. Okay, so there we go. So make sure you've added in the following settings. Most importantly, social account login on get. And I'll show you how this functionality works. Now, if I go back, let me run my server again. Right, there we go. Let's refresh. Now, if I say sign up with Google, it's going to take me to this page here that I had before. All right, and that is exactly what this functionality does, is it gives us that cleaner interface. Okay, so it's going to prompt you to choose an account. I'm going to do the one that I'm logged in as, so I'll click on that. Then you're going to want to say continue, and you'll see it's Django app 1, and there we go. We've been redirected to our dashboard. Perfect. All right, so that's just as easy as it is how you can integrate Google social authentication for your application. Simple and easy as that. All right, so that's how you can do that. I'm just going to say log out here, and that's how you can do it. Now, I also want to show you how you can test out the login here part. So if you say login here, you can say sign in with Google, and that's something else I also want to go ahead and test out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to sign out. And let's go back. See if the server's running. It is. Let's say login here, and we can say sign in with Google. And let's assume we have an account here with said user. We just need to add in our password. And there we go. All in place and perfectly like it should be. All right, so that's how you can see that is all into place. Now this logout functionality that we have here works with our default user functionality, okay, and it of course is just helping us to redirect. But when it comes to Google authentication, what you would of course focus on doing here is, if I were to refresh, I'll be logged into that account. So with OAuth's Google, you're of course going to have to manually sign out from this location. So that's how that's going to work in that regard. Now I do want to do one final test here, and that is to head on to our Django admin and to actually see if those records and that data was actually created. So I'd recommend that you stop your server and create a super user and say python manage.py, create super user. Here and say admin, add in a password. Okay, and run the server. So we want to see that data being populated from what we've set up with our Google accounts. All right, now let's refresh. All right, so go ahead and enter in your credentials now. All right, so once you've entered in your admin credentials, you can say login. Okay, perfect. And now we can go to social accounts. And we can see there we've got that particular user that we went ahead and registered, provided by Google, and that user was called 1. Let's go back and let's go to our user model here, and there we can see we have our admin user, which we just created, and that particular user that we used to sign in, and of course that user is called one time. So we can see that that also works. So when you are using Google authentication, it will adjust with your default Django user model table, your database table, and it will integrate seamlessly with that as well to see a list of your users. Alright guys, so that is essentially it for this video tutorial. So that's how you can integrate Google social authentication for your Django applications. Now there is a bit of an adjustment you may need to do in certain cases, but that is how you can go about setting it up for your project. Alright guys, so that's it for this video tutorial, and as always, thank you for support, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.